Welcome students. Today let's discuss about Digital Bharath Nidhi, whose implementation would start as guidelines to implement Digital Bharat Nidhi has been notified. To understand about Digital Bharat Nidhi comprehensively, firstly we need to understand why is it different from Universal Service Obligation Fund. When it's different, how it would be implemented differently, and what was the necessity to replace this Universal Service Obligation Fund is what we would be discussing as part of this video. Firstly, let's have a comparative analysis of what Universal Service Obligation Fund was and what Digital Bharat Nidhi would be. And for this, before coming to this comparison, we need to understand what Universal Service Obligation Fund was lacking. Universal Service Obligation Fund was established as part of Telecom Act of 2003, and the contributions to Universal Service Obligation Fund was by private players who would get telecom licenses to operate. They would contribute 5% of their aggregate gross revenues, and this money would be used to connect least connected or rural areas predominantly. Rural areas were not connected by telecom services. Programs like BharatNet etc. was used to connect through either optical fiber or through satellites or through any other means like towers. So this was Universal Service Obligation Fund. Then what was missing in it? The scope to utilize Universal Service Obligation Fund was narrow. It was just restricted to provide connectivity to new areas, and they did some good job to connect 2.5 lakh panchayats. Still, only 30% to 35% of fund was utilized. For example, there was a question that was posed in question hour in 2022, for which the answer was only 3,000 out of 9,000 crores were spent that year as part of Universal Service Obligation Fund. So the fund was underutilized. There was necessity to increase 200%. That means 200% increase of 3,000 would make 9,000 crores. So this is how underutilized it is. And the reason is that it should be used only for the narrower scope of improving connectivity. Now, we would understand how Digital Bharat Nidhi would increase the scope and how is it different from Universal Service Obligation Fund. That may be a question that may serve comparing these two, and this could form an apt answer. First, it was established as part of Telecom Act of 2003. This as part of Telecom Act of 2023. Scope is narrower. When I say scope is narrower, only to connect rural areas. Of course, the contributions are from 5% of AGR. How Digital Bharat Nidhi is different? Let's see. First one is establishing through different act. Second one, scope is broader because could be utilized to fund other allied schemes. For example, there is something called PM Janman or some other program which may increase digital literacy. It may be digital literacy or financial integration through using digital equipment or any other way where you can use to fund some other schemes. It may be funding through a mobile phone or some telecom equipment to fund some disabled people or any other social justice scheme which may have some overlapping with this agenda. You can utilize the fund for those schemes. This is how it is increasing the scope. So when you have an increased scope, government would expect that the utilization is possible to increase. So this is the whole agenda. This is the core part of this video. If you understood this, then the last thing that I would say is, unlike the 5% AGR, the same contribution would come, but first it would flow into Consolidated Fund of India, and then government would allocate the fund as part of Digital Bharat Nidhi in budget. So this is how the fund allocation is, and how the scope has increased, and what was the necessity to bring the Telecom Act of 2023 and change it because of this increasing scope to make sure it is utilized better. Hope you understood this concept better. If you understood this, I would leave you with the question to compare and contrast Universal Service Obligation Fund and Digital Bharat Nidhi. You can post your answers with 150-word analysis or a comparative table that you can draw. Another day with better content and more informative video, I'll be back before you. Till then, thank you.